Hello and welcome to the John Birch Society's podcast. The following speech was given on the evening of October 29th, 2005 by the Honorable Dr. Ron Paul, Congressional Representative for Texas 14th District.
Our next speaker is known to every one of us, I'm sure, at least in part, if not much more than that. I want to start off by telling a little story about something this man did. He's very courageous, as you know. I think he and Virginia, they get together every Monday morning and they say, what are we going to vote against this week? You know? It was back in October of 2002 that Ron Paul was a member of the House International Relations Committee. He still is in that committee. They used to call it Foreign Affairs. Now it has to be international and all this kind of stuff. And at the meeting, I think there's 45 members in that committee, and at the meeting, he introduced the motion to the chairman, Henry Hyde of Illinois. He said, Mr. Chairman, I move that we declare war on Iraq, which didn't happen, of course, until March, 6 months later. And he said, I intend to vote against my measure because I don't think we should go to war against Iraq, but we should not ignore that provision of the Constitution that says only Congress can declare war. All right? Well, now, what do you suppose Mr. Hyde said? Well, I don't know exactly the quotes, but he did use the word anachronistic. He said, Ron, we don't bother with that anymore. That's a bygone idea. It's anachronistic to think about that. And he's a conservative, right? But that's the attitude in Washington. And of course, I was glad to see Ron being able to smoke this guy out. He's another faker. So what I did was I got some people up in his district in Illinois. I told them about this. And I said, write him a letter and ask him if he thinks the part in the Constitution that says that all members of Congress should be paid a salary, ask him if that's anachronistic. Well, some of them did, and they never got an answer, as you might expect, right? Our next speaker has represented his Texas constituents during 2 tours of duty. He served for 3 terms in the beginning in the late 70s and into the 80s. And then he went back to practicing medicine after a try at getting a Senate seat. It didn't work. So he was back working in medicine, and then more alarmed every day, I suppose, about what was going on. He decided to go back and try to get a seat back in Congress again. And he succeeded in 1996 and has served there ever since. His unquestioned commitment to honor the congressman's oath to adhere to the Constitution sets him apart. There are not that many, as you know, who feel that way, and certainly not that many who have ever read the Constitution. So we're delighted to have him with us. He's brought his lovely wife, Carol, with him. I'm always glad to see her. And so please welcome Dr. Ron Paul. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What a delight. In Washington, I give occasional speeches, and very few listen, and I never get any applause, so that's why I come here to hear you. Thank you. It's nice to leave Washington, and it's nice to go to Texas, and it's nice to visit groups like this. So, and I'm very serious about that. You know, if you thought only about Washington, it could get depressing, you know, up there. A lot of people say, you know, don't you get really discouraged with all this? Don't you really get down? I said, absolutely not. I am never discouraged up there, but I have real low expectations. I think you're pretty safe tonight. You've already heard from Virginia. It was a delight to hear her, and you have a fantastic speaker coming up in a little bit. So I'm sort of relaxed now. You know, I don't have to do a heck of a lot here because you have 2 other speakers. But it is really a pleasure to be here. And I could remind you, of course, that I am here from the government. I'm here to help you, so you're okay. So that's pretty good. But I am very pleased that you, many of you in here, helped get Virginia to Washington. It has been a real help. It didn't take her too long. She got on 1146. She's a co-sponsor for 1146. Now, she did tell you about that one vote, 11 of us. That's not very many. What's the percentage of that of 435? That's a low percentage, but she was there. But she's getting me a little bit worried because she's starting to challenge me a little bit. You know, I have a reputation up there for voting by myself now and then. And somebody did a study not too long ago, and they found out that I voted 126 times by myself between 2000 and 2004. But at the rate we're going, she's liable to join me, and I won't have that reputation anymore. But it is a real delight to have her there. And we talk about sending help, and you certainly have sent some help when you sent Virginia up there. So this is great. But, you know, a lot of times, and I heard somebody ask Virginia, they said, how do people like you get elected? And believe me, I get that asked all the time. How do you get elected? And then they say, members of Congress say, I can see how you could slip in here, but how do you get reelected is the big thing. Well, you have to have a few secret weapons. One of my secret weapons is sitting over here is a wife, and she does a good job, and having a bunch of kids. I have 5 kids and 17 grandchildren. They help campaign. Delivered 4,000 babies. That helps too. So that's always an assistant. But Carol claims she doesn't deal in politics. She's only given me two bits of advice. And one was that we should do a cookbook. Anybody ever hear of the cookbook that we sent out? I think maybe some of you are on our mailing list. She does a cookbook at Christmas time, and family recipes, pictures of the kids. And she brought that idea to me, and I said, no way. I said, that's silly. I said, who cares about that stuff? I said, they want to hear me talk about the Exchange Stabilization Fund and the IMF and the World Bank. She says, no, they want to know something about you. They want to know you have kids because they're going to say bad things about you. And if they know you have a family and that you think along those lines, that will neutralize it. And you know what? She was right about that. It's very beneficial. Politics is not just about philosophy, although that's what drives us possibly here. But you know, there's a lot of people that like to know what we're doing and what our families are like. But you know, she had another bit of advice, and she doesn't get involved in legislation. So she doesn't challenge me too often on my votes. But she had an opinion about this. This is a small copy of the Constitution, a small booklet of the Constitution. The Constitution is small, and she told me once, she says, why is it that you guys in Congress can't write legislation as clearly written as this little booklet? She thought that for anybody to be passing laws, the laws ought to be as simple and clean, straightforward as the way the Constitution was written. And you know, if you think about that, if we wrote things like that in Washington so that everybody in the country could understand it, and the members of Congress could actually read it, and the members of Congress understand it, wouldn't that be a miracle? That would be fantastic. That's not the way it's done. It's done in a conniving manner. I'm always convinced the most important things ever passed in the Congress never gets open debate. It usually gets stuck in at the last minute in a conference report and buried, and you really have to have good staff to dig that out to let the member know what's going on, because there's no way we can keep up as individuals. Staff is very important. And I became a new member twice, in the 70s and in 97. And I had the same rule for both of them, both times. Because you get hundreds and hundreds of applications. Because a bunch of members leave and retire, and these guys that are on the Hill, they need jobs. So you get stacks and stacks of applications. And then you have other applications of people who had not worked on the Hill. Now, I had this is just personal with me. My rule was anybody who had any Hill experience, I just pushed them aside. I wanted new people that did not have, was not ingrained with Hill experience, and I have done well. And my staff are very dedicated, very low turnover, and I've had other staff members tell my staff people, you guys really have it easy. All you have to do is read it and decide whether it's constitutional No, that's too easy. He says, we have to weigh it, read it, and then weigh it. On this hand, it means this. What does it mean to our supporters here? And they go through all that, and they agonize over this. And it would be nice if my staff could read every single word of every bill, but they can't. But I require them to read enough to find out if there's something in there that's not constitutional, and if there's something in there that isn't, I'm not going to vote for it. And it actually sounds like a tough job to keep the staff going and reading such detail, but you know what? They don't have to read very far. They get down one page or so, and they find out, oh, there it is. So, the Patriot Act was one of the worst pieces of legislation, the way that was passed. The Patriot Act, came up in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, just within days, and I had told my staff that keep an eye on it. We need to get hold of this. The bill's coming up. I want to know when it becomes available, and it became available about 1 hour before it went to the floor, and we had to search for it and get it on the internet, and it wasn't on the website that it was supposed to be on. There was no printed version of it. And then they went down and had an hour or two of debate. I know that very, very few members had the vaguest idea what was in the bill, but it was almost an automatic. Their vision was, how can we not do something? The people are frightened. They come to the government. They want to be safe and they want to be secure. So their mind was made up. No matter what was put out there, they were going to vote for it. And that's how some of the worst pieces of legislation get passed. And I think back then there were only 3 Republicans and a couple dozen maybe Democrats that voted against it. I was delighted that members of the society were astute enough to figure out that being a good conservative doesn't mean that we can't be good civil libertarians and protect personal liberties. And why in the world, under those circumstances, should we be punishing American people? That's right. And that's what that bill's all about. And the Patriot Act is in the process of getting passed again and strengthened. They've already come up with the national ID card, putting all those regulations on the driver's license, and they have given the power to the Secretary of Homeland Security to put anything they want or he wants on the chip in the driver's license. He has the authority without ever going back to Congress. So they can put radio frequency identification on every driver license in this country connected with your driver's license and your Social Security number. And just this month, they're starting radio frequency identification on all passports, which means that when you have this, that you don't even need to take your passport or your driver's license out of your wallet. They can read what is on that where you are. And, when they think about this idea that you can know where your automobile is just about any time with all the satellite transmissions and all, I mean, we really have a job to be alert to taking technology that is very beneficial and helpful to us and allowing it to get into the hands of government. And that's going to take a tremendous amount of work and effort. But, being in Congress does have to be a little lighthearted at time, or it will get you down. But, I found a light moment not too many weeks ago that we had a piece of legislation. And do you know that every once in a while they do things in Washington by partisanship, and it's political? Have you ever noticed that? Well, the Democrats have been annoyed with the Republicans. Not on philosophical reasons. I don't know why they should complain. Republicans are doing everything the Democrats want anyway. But it's a matter of wanting to have power. And yet they've also been annoyed because they don't think and this is even before the recent indictments and all, they have always resented the fact that they don't think they get the people in the administration to answer clearly enough when they're before the committees. So the Democrat had an interesting amendment I think it was on justice bill or something. So they come up, and the amendment was very challenging. It said that we expect that anybody in the administration, when they testify before the Congress, they should tell the truth. And the Republicans said, "Oh, this is terrible. This is terrible. We're trapped. Maybe it'll pass by voice vote and we won't have to vote on this." So the Republicans said, "Okay, we'll let it go." So it passed on voice vote. And the Democrats said, "No way. We're going to get a recorded vote on this. We're going to make them admit this, So the voice vote came up, but the Republicans were trapped because if they voted to do this meant that the administration had been telling lies all along. And otherwise, then they have to take, the other position was, well, you don't have to tell the truth. But the Republicans won that vote. They still don't have to tell the truth when they testify before the Congress. On another piece of legislation, a creative Democrat came up with the idea that because of the way we went to war, and it was mentioned in the introduction how annoyed I was about the process, he said that the amendment said that if the president decides to go into another country, that he cannot do it unless he conforms to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which, of course, would be the war powers. And that only got 128 votes, saying that if the president wants to go to war in an additional country, that you should obey Article 1, Section 8. Rice, this last week, said that before the Senate committee, she said that the president already has authority to wage war against Syria without coming to the Congress because of the powers given after 9/11 as well as the authority to go into Iraq. I mean, that to me is really up high on the list of the importance of the Constitution. What happened during the Revolution was to take the power to wage war away from the executive branch, away from the king, and put it as close to the people as possible because it's so serious. The resolution that was finally passed that did not declare war, it transferred the power. It was unconstitutional to do this, but by majority vote, the Congress transferred the power and authority to go to war from the legislative branch to the executive branch, and it said it did not tell the president he had to go to war. It didn't tell the president he couldn't go to war. It didn't tell him the circumstances. It just said, if you think it's important, go to war if you have to. And, of course, 6 months later, he did. But they gave two specific points on why we should give him this authority. The first one was because our national security was being threatened by Saddam Hussein. Now, just think about that. Yeah, he was really threatening us. What was he going to do, invade us with tanks or send a missile? We had been bombing him for 12 years, and he hadn't even hit one airplane yet. He didn't have an airplane, didn't have a navy, essentially had no army, but we were frightened enough because he was a threat to our national security. He might have been a threat to somebody's oil well or something like that, but he wasn't a threat to our national security. But the second reason, it was because we had to make sure the UN resolutions were enforced, lest the UN lose credibility. In the resolution, the UN was mentioned 21 times, and Article 1, Section 8 was totally ignored. So we're well along our way toward internationalism, where we are doing the bidding of the internationalists. And, of course, the project you're working on now, FTAA, the one we just almost won, should have won, CAFTA. I mean, just think of it. It's the UN, the WTO, the IMF, the World Bank, CAFTA, NAFTA, and FTAA. I mean, it's on and on and on. And each one is a direct threat to our national security. All of those should be abolished. I'm confident that even within this room, we might have some disagreements on trade policy. You know, what the tariff should be on which countries and whatnot. But the Constitution is very clear. The administration does not have the authority to design trade policy. It's a congressional function. And we can't transfer that power through a congressional act to the president or the executive branch. It's only the Congress can do it. So we might have a debate, and the Congress should have a debate. Who should have the tariffs or whatnot? I happen to think free trade is a pretty good idea. I like to have as much free trade as possible, but I detest both the attempt through these organizations, which I see as an attack on sovereignty, but I don't even think they're free traders. They're a bunch of, and they're pseudo-protectionists. They go to the WTO to get protection, so they're not even true free traders. Because I think sanctions on certain countries are what aggravates things. The founders were very clear about this. They wanted us to be friendly with countries and trade with countries and get along with countries and travel. But they didn't believe that we should send our armies first and trade second. The armies, matter of fact, they didn't even believe in these standing armies. They tended to get us into too much trouble. But the advice by the founders was very clear, and the advice that we should take today is stay out of these entangling alliances. And in the meantime, if we did that, I bet we could save a couple bucks. We could save a lot of money. So a lot of people ask me, just a matter of fact, I was asked yesterday, and I keep wondering, where are they? What wavelength? And they came over and they said, do you want to go on a junket? And I said, no, I don't want to go on a junket. I said, I don't need to go overseas to find out that I don't want to spend any money overseas. They're going over to check and see how it's being spent, as if they're really going to find out. But we don't need to be spending that money. I think all this money that we spend in the military-industrial complex detracts from national defense. And the best example of this is what we've just got done doing, and that is we finally put the nail in the coffin about closing bases down in the United States. You think, well, you're a fiscal conservative. Why aren't you willing to close down all those bases in the United States and save some money? It's true, there's some, but they need to be closed down. But my opinion is I'm not going to close down a single base in this country until we quit building them overseas. Yeah. Bases in Saudi Arabia, bases in Baghdad. We're building an embassy. You know, we condemned Hussein for all his palaces. We're building the biggest palace in the history of foreign service. We're building an embassy. It's going to cost you and us all $1 billion. 4 huge air bases, military bases in Iraq. And then they wonder why they get annoyed at us. I mean, what would we think as Americans if the Chinese came in and occupied the Gulf of Mexico and started putting bases in Texas or Florida or someplace? Do you think we'd be annoyed? But here we are, we're over there, and then we wonder, well, why don't they like us? Well, I don't think it's that hard to figure out. I just love the foreign policy of the Founding Fathers and the advice of George Washington. Just mind our own business. Besides, you know, on the International Relations Committee, and this came up just recently again, and you're going to hear more about it because the move right now is to go to Syria. It looks like Syria will get hit next. And we're always condemning Syria. Far from an ideal country, obviously. But we're condemning Syria because, you know, they have a border between Syria and Iraq. And lo and behold, there are openings and people sneak in and out of the border over there in Syria that haven't sealed their borders. I told them on the committee once, I said, how can you condemn the Syrians? What about our own borders? why we need to come home, at least bring the military home and start thinking about doing something with our borders. And that is a big issue. And I don't think for a minute we have to be anti-immigrant. I bet you a lot of people in this room have had ancestors that were immigrants at one time. So we can't be anti-immigrant. But boy, we can start talking about something wrong. I had a bill, it was passed, I think I even got it passed on the House floor, and it said the nations that were listed as terrorist nations, potential terrorists, and that they could not have any students come in from that country unless they got a special waiver from the Secretary of Department of Defense. It wasn't an absolute, but it just said, whoa, why are we letting these people come in by the hundreds into our country from countries that we've already declared as terrorist countries? And it passed in the House, and this is what happened in the conference. It was wiped out. It was taken out, and they said, well, we don't want to offend people, and yet our leadership, Republican leadership in the Congress as well as the administration, did not want that in there. That is one. I have several items that I talk about when I talk about immigration. One item is I'm absolutely opposed to amnesty. That's one thing I don't think we should deal with. But also, I think if you give illegals an incentive to come in, you'll get more of them. And we have too many incentives. One is that I don't think there should be ever a federal mandate on any state to finance any welfare program for any immigrant. But medical care and health care, it's going to bankrupt this country. Another little thing that I would do is some people claim we wouldn't have to change the Constitution. I tend to think that we probably would. But anyway, I think it's time that stepping across the border and having a baby shouldn't give them automatic citizenship. And also, I don't think I have a bill in that will not give Social Security benefits to illegal aliens. And right now, if they can come over and work as little as 18 months, go back and finish up working in Mexico, and they get retired, we give them our Social Security benefits. They're talking about opening up a Social Security office in Mexico City. I mean, that's how insane it is. But it's all because we don't want to offend, and all because of this movement toward internationalism, of having one world government and blending and getting rid of the boundaries. So this is one thing that Bush suffers the most from in the Republican base on immigration, but I haven't heard him budging much on that. And yet the sentiment of the American people are pretty tired of this. But, the way the system works up there, they have to do a little bit of talking and convincing people of what's going on. But there was a quote by the president that sort of tells you a little bit about how the system works and what he might be really thinking in his mind. And I think it's a classic quote. He says, and this is the president, he says, see, in my line of work, you have to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in, to kind of catapult the propaganda.
Oh, catapult.
So you keep saying the same thing over again, and then you get the propaganda. Well, anyway, the system up there deserves we deserve better than what we're getting in Washington. And things are changing, and things are improving outside of Washington. But the debt is out of control. The spending is out of control. The Republicans have not done one single thing to cut back. And right now, even the talk of cutting, the big debate is whether they're going to cut 30 in order to pay for Katrina. And they've been asked for $250 billion. They're talking about, well, we have to find some cuts. And they're talking about cutting $35 to $50 billion over 10 years. And they're arguing about whether it's going to be 35 or 50. It is so far removed from reality. The national debt is going up $600 billion a year. We borrow $600 billion a year from foreigners, in particular right now, Japan and China. We lose our industrial base. It's all going overseas. And then we print money, and the foolish people of the world still take our money as if it were gold. And we get to send that money over there, and then they loan it back to us. That system cannot last. It's going to come to an end. I've been very interested, as most of you know, in monetary policy. I've been on the banking committee the whole time I've been in Washington. I'd like to get people talking about the money issue, because the money issue is so crucial, and it's going to become one of the major issues of our time. And this is the reason why, if we look back at the Constitution and look back at what we have been told to do, it's not too hard to figure out what we should do. It says gold and silver should be legal tender, and we should not have a Federal Reserve System. We don't have many ways to finance this extravagant spending. The odds of us cutting back on spending, I think, are pretty slim until we have a catastrophe. And we will have a financial crisis. Bernanke is not going to save the inflation that Greenspan has orchestrated and all the bubbles that he has created and held things together. Bernanke has made the statement that he loves printing press money. He says it's a fantastic investment. He says you can print unlimited amounts of money, and you can generate good inflation. If you have to, you can drop the money out of helicopters. So that is how far he is removed from the idea of sound money. The reason sound money is so important, and it was to the founders, the founders had gone through the example, the runaway inflation of the continental dollar. It went to zero value. And the sound money is a restraint on big government. It means if you don't like runaway welfare spending, and if you don't like runaway international warfare spending, you have to have a gold standard, because governments have to tax for what they spend, and there is no way the economy could survive, or the politicians could survive, if they raised taxes by $600 billion for this year's expenditures. It's not going to happen. Matter of fact, the market doesn't even tolerate the borrowing. We tax so much and then we quit. We borrow so much and then we quit, because otherwise the interest rates are going to go up. So the Fed is there, the magical Fed. So we spend the money, and then the Fed prints the money, and the politicians get credit. Yes, they complain a little back home, and they say, oh, there's a lot of pork barreling going back home. But believe me, they're intimidated in Washington to believe that if they don't vote for those boondoggles, they're not going to get reelected. And the convenient method of doing this is just printing the money. And this is why we have it. And this is why in 1913 it was introduced, and finally it was totally destroyed by 1971, and we've been on a paper money standard since. We have now lost 96% of the value of the dollar from the time the Federal Reserve was introduced. And it's going to continue to go down, and the end stages of a paper currency is unpredictable, and sometimes it's rampant. When the dollar goes down rapidly, that means prices go up rapidly and interest rates go up. And I think we're probably in the early stages of that. This should not be frightening to us, because we know it's coming and we should be prepared for it, and it should be an opportunity for us to know what we ought to do. And then we ought to be talking about freedom and liberty and the Constitution and the work that the Birch Society has been involved in so long, because our time is coming for our views to be acceptable and have an influence on this country. You know, most of us are very interested in politics, and there's a purpose for politics. There should be but one purpose. The purpose of politics is to promote liberty and nothing else. Unfortunately, those individuals I run into Washington, except for the rare exception, they're there because they like the job. They're there because they like the power. They like the influence. They aren't philosophic people. Now, that's a mixed bag. That sounds all negative. But they're also willing to bend, because they're not strong philosophic people, which means if our message cuts out and our message is the prevailing wisdom of the country, they'll do it. It's as simple as that. So our job is to influence the people. And that is not an unbearable task. This is why the Birch Society has been so important over the years. And that is, they understand, the society has understood how important education is, but they don't give up on the political part of trying to influence our member of Congress. And they have targeted the right body, and that is Congress. Congress itself, especially the House of Representatives. Representatives. When the people change, the House of Representatives will change, and the country will change. And the opportunity is coming. Our problem in this country is that we have accepted the notion that government assumed the responsibility that individuals should have. Liberals have assumed the responsibility, assumption that they can make the economy fair for everybody and redistribute the wealth and everybody's going to be happy. And I give most of them the benefit of the doubt that they're well motivated, but they don't understand a thing about the principles of liberty, and they don't understand anything about economics or human nature. But they would like to use force of government to redistribute wealth, and it doesn't work because it drives down production. But too many conservatives are going to be interested in teaching people what they should do and how they should take care of their bodies and what should they eat and drink and smoke. And that's a personal thing. We have a drug war going on. It's been going on for 30 years. It has been a total failure. We spend $69 billion a year designing a program of prohibition that we should have learned didn't work in the 1920s. We need to get rid of that war too. But when we allow a government to assume these responsibilities in economic or personal liberties or internationally, what happens is that we pretend they know what is virtuous and what should be our striving for excellence. Virtue and excellence is the goal of being a free people. That can only come from individuals. It can't come from government. Anytime a government tries to do this economically or in a personal sense of trying to make us better people or a better economy, they can only do it with an attack on personal liberty. And that's why it always fails. This is why it is so important to know what we're striving for, and that is individual liberty. We are important as individuals for a very valuable reason, and that is our life and our liberties come from our Creator and not from our government. In spite of the problems that we face, I'm a basic optimist because I think things have been improving all the time. I love the internet. I love the information that circulates, and I believe that we have the upper hand. Samuel Adams was very, very plain about this. He says it does not take a majority. It takes an irate, tireless effort by a minority of people, and that's the way it's always been. There was only a small minority of the people who agitated for our revolution. So it is the people who think and have beliefs and convictions, and that is why this organization is so good. You have belief and convictions, and you're willing to work and help to get this information out and help people to get to Congress. This is the reason I come and so often join in encouraging the John Birch Society to continue this effort, because it is this type of effort that will make it or break it, and I believe America is worth this fight, and I believe we will have victory in the end. Thank you.